Welcome, everybody. Very happy to be here. Thank you to Angie for inviting us, and thank you, of course, to the Honorable Judge Reggie Walton. Today, we wanted to talk about what's going on in the world, but also Becoming Thurgood, America's Social Architect. So we're really happy to be here, and without further ado, you want to say anything to introduce yourself, Judge Walton?
Well, good afternoon to everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. Justice Marshall was one of my idols. He really was the inspiration that caused me to want to go to law school and become a lawyer and then ultimately become a judge. So it's an honor to have the opportunity to speak about him.
And I'm Dr. Marcus Board, professor of political science here at Howard University. Very happy to be here. So let's jump into that. With this documentary, they're talking about Justice Marshall as a social architect, going back to his roots in Baltimore. Can you tell us a little bit about how that directly affected and impacted your journey?
Well, I grew up in a small town in western Pennsylvania, and although it wasn't the South, it was very much like the South as far as opportunities were concerned. Growing up, I never had a black teacher. I never had a black football coach. My mother couldn't even get a job working in a 5 and 10 cent store selling goods. There were no blacks who had supervisory positions in the steel mill. And as a result of that, I really had no perspective that getting an education was a means by which I was going to make a living. And as a result of that, I didn't perform well academically. When I was in high school, I put all of my energies into athletics. And that was my out, my means of going to college. I received a football scholarship. But for that, I probably would have remained in that town working in the steel mill and ultimately being unemployed because the steel mills ultimately closed.
Wow. Yeah, that's one of the big challenges, too, in that era is that while we might designate or differentiate between the South and the North, as Thurgood said, it's the North-South. Being in a free state or being in a state where segregation was still thriving in that era really stopped you from being able to even dream about your aptitude. So how did you make that transition from someone who wasn't as committed to school and education and was a little more committed to being maybe a fullback, a halfback?
Running back.
There you go. Yeah. How did you make that transition, and then how did that bring you into law school?
Well, I had some opportunities to go to some large white institutions to play football. But I had heard about West Virginia State College because a number of individuals from my area had gone there. And I felt that I needed the nurturing that you receive at a historical black college. And that's why I chose West Virginia State. And fortunately, I made that decision because I did have the association with young men who were aspiring to do well academically, and they inspired me, which is one of the reasons I joined Alpha Phi Alpha.
Back to Justice Marshall. Can you tell us a little bit about your career and how his legacy has affected your legacy as a judge?
I mean, it was really Dr. King and Justice Marshall that were inspirations to me. And unfortunately, we are sort of regressing in today's world. And to see the things that Justice Marshall was willing to do to try and improve the plight of African Americans in this country was inspirational because he put his life on the line. If any of you have not read the book, Devil in the Grove, I recommend that you read it. It's very inspirational, and it shows his courage that he was willing to venture into the South to represent young black men who had been wrongfully accused of rape and put his own life at risk. He was constantly threatened, but despite that, he believed in the cause. He believed in trying to provide a better world for his people, and he fought to do that even though he put his life at risk.
And I know this extends into some of your work that you were doing in prisons to try and stop those types of violence from happening. Can you tell us a little bit about that work?
Yeah, I chaired the National Prison Rape Elimination Commission, which was supposed to complete its work in 2 years, but the work was so massive it took us 5 years to complete our mission. And it's very humbling to see what is happening to many of our young people who go into prisons and jails in America. I was shocked to see and hear about the number of young men and women who end up being sexually assaulted when they are incarcerated. And unfortunately, I hate to say this, some of the states that have the most prolific problem as far as that is concerned are some of our poorer states in the South. And those states fought against some of the things that we were trying to do to improve the situation, but yet they have some of the worst problems.
So we'll transition a little bit into some of the stuff going on today. Um, as you know, moving for Black Lives, pretty critical of the justice system broadly, more focused on police, but I know as a judge, you may have had some understanding or appreciation for what was going on. How do you navigate that as a person whose career, whose life and legacy is so much tied into the law in this country?
What's a challenge? I do believe in accountability, and I do believe when people engage in aberrant behavior, they have to be held accountable for that conduct. On the other hand, we have to appreciate that there are many reasons why many people end up in the criminal justice system. A lot of it relates to poverty and lack of opportunity. And one of the first things I look at when I receive a pre-sentence report and I have to decide what sentence I'm going to impose, and many of the individuals before me are young Black men, is did they have a father in their life? And almost to a person, there are rarities when that's not the case, but only to almost to a person, they did not have a father in their life. And that's something that we've got to work on because I think it's very important for young men to have strong father figures in their life. And if we don't fix that, we're going to have some difficult times ahead. You know, the infusion of additional law enforcement sources here in Washington and the military, that's not the answer. Yes, I do believe in accountability. I do believe that as citizens, we should be free from crime. But we're not going to do that just by locking people up and prosecuting people, as important as that is. There are other things that we have to do. If we don't improve the environment that many of our young people are coming from, they're going to continue to engage in aberrant behavior. So we've got to have a multifaceted effort. We've got to improve our educational system. We've got to provide better job opportunities. We've got to do a lot of things in order to improve the plight of many of the people who end up before me who have their lives destroyed by having to go to prison.
Yeah, that's great. And I think one of the things that you're kind of touching on is the challenges of intergenerational progress. And so I want you to say a little bit, we have some students here. I met Casey and Lyric and Zion and a few, of course, I'm faculty here at Howard University. Can you talk about how our different generations can work together towards improving those life experiences?
I think we have to. I have a number of young people who work in my chambers to get an appreciation of what it is to be a lawyer, to be a judge. And I think it's important. I think we have to open up our lives to others to show them that there is an opportunity to rise from their circumstances and to acquire success in a world that's very difficult. One of the things I missed from my time when I was on the Superior Court, the local city court here in Washington, is serving in the juvenile division. And I saw some young people I was able to make a difference in their lives. And I believe that a lot of our young men can overcome some of their difficulties if just given an opportunity. One young man actually went to Lincoln University, where Justice Marshall went. He actually appeared before me charged with 3 robberies. But there was something about this young man that I thought was salvageable, so I put him on probation. I didn't lock him up. I got a good friend to work with him who happened to be a Kappa, so there are good Kappas out there too. And he was able to work with him, and he helped him get into Lincoln, where he had gone to school. This young man graduated from Lincoln. He came back and he got a job as a teacher in Southeast Washington, something that we really need, young Black men teaching, because I think that role modeling is very important. Unfortunately, his life was snuffed out several years later because in order to supplement his income, because we don't pay teachers well, he would drive people from a particular community out to Maryland to the supermarket to buy fresh food. And unfortunately, other young men in the community knew what he was doing, figured he was making money doing that, and they waited for him one evening and they shot and killed him. But he's a prime example of if we make the investment in young people, despite where they're starting from, they can overcome a lot of difficulties, but we got to be willing to invest in them. We just can't throw money at law enforcement and think that we're going to solve the problem. That's just not alone the answer.
You mentioned sports. You mentioned fraternal organizations. Can you talk to us about how much that's meant for you and what you might maybe imagine it meant for Justice Marshall? How does that bring you into this kind of mindset? Because I got to say, there's not a lot of people who share this vision for what change looks like. A lot of folks are saying lock them up, put them in jail, and a part of the problem of the homes with fewer fathers is because so many are in jail. So how did you become that thinker, and maybe how did the fraternal organizations and sports do that for you?
Well, sports was very important because I did well athletically, but I was small.
Mm.
And having taken some of the hard knocks that I took, but nonetheless got up and kept fighting on, that's what I brought into the academic arena. When it was tough, I just got tougher.
Mm.
And I think you have to be willing to fight and try and overcome some of your deficiencies. And I think that can happen. I had a deficiency in reading. And I remember I was in the 11th grade, and the former one of the former football coaches who had retired because of a heart attack, he was our history teacher, and he made me stand up and turn around and try and read. And it was clear that I couldn't read very well. And he told me, he said, Reggie, I know you think, like a lot of young men, that you're going to rise to that next level and you're going to be running footballs on Sunday afternoons. He said, but the reality is that you're small, and that's probably not going to happen. And you better start thinking about academically what you're going to do in order to try and make a living through the use of your brain and not your body. And that carried with me significantly. And then when I went to college, I associated myself with the young men who ended up becoming alphas to a large degree because they were really invested in their education. And they inspired me. They worked hard. I didn't want to be left behind, and they were the ones making the A's and the B's, and I wasn't. And I didn't start out that way, but by the time I was in my senior year, I was on the dean's list. But it was hard work. When I went to American University Law School, it was very difficult. I used to study 13, 14 hours every day. And it was a lot more than I know some of my colleagues had to study. But I had to put that investment in if I was going to rise to the top and be successful. And fortunately, that happened. And I think athletics and being a part of Alpha Phi Alpha really were a significant part of what I've been able to do in my life.
For those watching at home, Alpha starts with an A. Uh, sorry, had to sneak one in there. So I'd be remiss if I didn't mention your wife, I believe, is a physician,
Yes.
and Pauli Murray played a huge role in Justice Marshall and their approach in the separate but equal case in Brown versus Board of Education. Can you talk about how young women have affected the movement in your life, and young and advanced, mature women have affected your life?
Well, I mean, my mother was an inspiration. She graduated from high school as an honor student, but because she graduated, I think it was in 1942, there were just not opportunities for a young black woman to be able to go to college. So that was something that she wasn't able to do. And I think she was frustrated throughout her entire life because of that. Although she did later in life end up going back to school, and she got an associate's degree, which she was very proud of. But I saw the frustration that she had because she had not been able to achieve what she felt she had the capacity to achieve. And while she didn't, drumbeat us into doing well academically, there was obviously something that she and my father did that inspired us that many of our peers did not have that same inspiration, because I have a law degree. My brother and sister both have master's degrees in education, and that was a rarity from the community that I came from, and I attribute that significantly to my parents and to a large degree my mother. So women, I think, have always played a significant role in the life of the black community. And I'm saddened to see what now has happened to many of our black women professionals as a result of the purging that we now see taking place with our federal government. A lot of people have lost their opportunities, have lost their careers, and many of them are black women.
I know that you were a Bush appointee. How did the politics affect your ability to do your job? Obviously, you did a great job. That's why we're here today. But how did those politics impact you?
Well, I mean, there were disagreements, obviously, I had sometimes with members of the administration, but my objective, because I left a position as a judge
Mhm.
to work in the White House on the drug issue, and I felt very strongly about addressing the problem of drugs in America because I had seen the devastating impact drugs have had on many communities and individuals in communities. And unfortunately, many of those communities are minority communities. So I felt committed to do that work, but it wasn't easy. It was very difficult sometimes navigating some of the issues you had to deal with because of sometimes the mindset of individuals who felt that law enforcement and locking people up was the principal way that you had to address the problem. And I emphasize the importance of a holistic approach dealing with treatment, dealing with prevention, and also law enforcement, which has to be a part of the overall effort. And so I think that collective, multifaceted means of trying to address the problem is what we need to be doing. And unfortunately, because politicians want things to happen very quickly, so when they come up for a reelection, they can say, I did this and I made this improvement. But when you're talking about social issues like the problem of drug addiction and the plagues of drugs, that's going to be a long time proposition. So you've got to be willing to put the funding and the effort long term into trying to address the problem. And if you're not willing to make that commitment and you're only trying to have short term reward, you're not going to be successful. And I think that's why we failed many times in addressing social issues that plague our country.
Well, let's pivot a little bit to what we're looking to in the future. So Thurgood Marshall is known as America's social architect. We're getting this vision of his legacy in an effort to try and help us spur some vision, spur some hope for the future. How do you imagine things are going now? As you mentioned earlier, we have all sorts of federal agents that were in DC for an extended period of time. And that capacity for them to continue to occupy this space seems never ending. So there's some challenges in the rule of law right now. Do you think that the law still is a space where we can do that work, or do you think the holistic view of change requires us to work in the law and much further beyond?
I think the law still plays and will play a significant role in the future of this country and the future of people of color. I have my real concerns about what we see taking place in America today. We are regressing, and rights that we sort of took for granted are not there anymore. And I fear where we're going as a country. And I think we have to have strong personalities who are willing to put their lives on the line, as Justice Marshall did, to try and turn the clock back in the direction where it should be going, because it's not going in that direction now. And I don't know if we can. I hope we can. But I think there are a lot of things being done that are seeking to deter the efforts that we saw taking place back then, that I think will be an impediment to our maybe surviving as the democracy that we've known. I have a grandson and I've got a granddaughter on the way, and I sure hope that opportunities will be available for them. But I have my concerns. We just saw recently where there was a large amount of money that was being basically provided to assist young people of color to go to college, and that money is being drawn back. My great fear is that we may see, and I hope not, because I still believe that historical black colleges and universities still play an important role in the lives of Americans, many Americans. And my fear is that just like we see some of the rollbacks regarding affirmative action and the constant drumbeat against DEI, which is, I think, the code word for something else.
Is it me?
No, I have my real concerns about what's going on. And, we've closed the doors to many of the majority white institutions because of the attack and the demise of affirmative action. And now we see it having its impact even on other institutions. I hope not, there'll be an effort to roll back funding for historical black colleges and universities. I fear that that is something that conceivably would happen. I mean, we've got to fight, because if we don't fight, the opportunities that we have so long taken for granted for the things, because of the things that Justice Marshall did, we're going to lose. And we can't lose. If we lose, what does America become? Especially, what does it become for people of color?
We have a first question in the back.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Marie-Véronique Tomasi. I'm a freshman TV and film major here at Howard University. And, You spoke a lot about young black men being dealt the wrong cards and us having to put things in place to offer them better opportunities. And I was wondering about young black women, especially young black mothers, who are also being dealt the wrong cards, and what we can put in place to offer them better opportunities, if we can offer them like amazing opportunities at all.
I didn't mean to differentiate between young black women and young black men. It's just that what I see, unfortunately, mostly before me, who are coming into court charged with criminal offenses, are young black men. I don't see many young black women. That's not to say that there are not impediments that confront young black women to the same extent, maybe in a different perspective, as young black men. So I think, yeah, it's important. I mean, I only have a daughter, and I think I played a very significant role in her life. So I think fathers are very important to both young men and young women. So again, I wasn't zeroing out women and saying that, young black women don't have challenges too, but it's just because of the world in which I live as far as a judge is concerned dealing with criminal cases, that most of the people who I see coming before me charged with crimes are young black men.
And I like that you said we have to fight. I think one of the things that folks aren't recognizing right now is that we're at an inflection point. There's a crisis right now, and if we don't reimagine the ways that we've done things in the past, then we're going to run into these same problems in the future. These things need to be codified into law. They need to be amendments. They need to be fought for in every facet. And I think you also alluded to some class issues. As we know, the most recent Supreme Court decision allows ICE, I believe, to have a reasonable suspicion based on, what was that? Looking like you work a low wage job, right? And among those challenges, I think, is there are class politics involved. Sorry, happens to be myself. But there are class politics involved that I think we need some, not just intergenerational, but across class conversations where folks who maybe weren't the best readers and folks who become judges can have the same conversations about what it looks like to move forward in the future together. So,
Well, it's true. I mean, I, I hope it doesn't end up being the case, but I think the opinion that you make reference to does open the door for racial profiling. Because although it says you can't just use race and ethnicity as the sole predicate for whether somebody can be approached and taken into custody, it does say you can consider that in conjunction with other factors.
yeah.
But when it gets to the street level, the ICE agent or the police officer, they may only look at it from the perspective of race or ethnicity.
Yeah.
And consequently, you'll find people who are being detained, arrested, and whatever, just because of how they look.
Do you think the law is still an effective tool for achieving racial justice today? Why or why not?
I do believe that we still have to seek to use the law as a means of social change. I think there are challenges, obviously, that we face. We see some of the decisions that are being made that are not, in my view, constructive to the advancement that we once were able to take for granted. And I have my concerns in that regard. But I still think that we have to seek to use the law as a country that's predicated on the rule of law to try and bring about change. But I think there are significant challenges that we face in trying to have that accomplished. I mean, if you look at, for example, the problem of crime and violence, a significant reason for that is the proliferation of guns. We have more guns in our country than we have people. And I firmly believe that despite what the Supreme Court has said about the individual right to bear arms, that if we don't, as a country, do something about guns, we will continue to see the violence and the carnage taking place in America. Because if you have the proliferation of guns that we have, the unfortunate reality is there are going to be people who shouldn't have those weapons who are going to get them. And when they get them, they're going to use them in a way that's detrimental to our society. So I think we've got to do something about guns, but there's not a will in America to do that. And as long as we don't do that, all of us are at risk. I just finished the case about 2 weeks ago involving a 27-year-old Uber driver who happened to just pull into a lane of traffic where this other guy who shot him wanted to be. And he took out his gun and shot this young man and killed him. That could happen to any of us. So we've got to do something about guns, but unfortunately, there's not the political will to do anything about it because I think, and I hate to say this, America loves guns more than they do people.
Just to chime in a little on some of these points, common sense gun reform is one of the very few issues that the overwhelming majority of Americans actually support. But to your point, the political will isn't there to actually make something happen. And then to your question, Marie, as well, Black women are the most incarcerated group in terms of the change from where they were to where they are now. So they are being targeted disproportionately now. And so they're now funneling into the system in ways that they hadn't been before. These are very important issues that continue to plague us today.
The one thing I think that Justice Marshall brought to the Supreme Court, which is sort of unique, is the history that he brought based upon his life and his upbringing. He appreciated, he, as far as his family was concerned, wasn't necessarily poor, but he grew up in an environment where he experienced poverty. He grew up in an environment where he experienced unlawful treatment of the law of people of color. He saw segregation. He saw deprivation of opportunity. And as a result of that, he brought something to the court based upon his own life experiences, which I think is very important for a judge, because academics are important, but you also have to think about, well, what impact what you're doing, what does it have on society? And if you've never lived that life, you have no appreciation that when you do certain things as a judge, it has an impact on the community at large. And I think that was something that he was able to bring to the court, and he was able probably to talk to his fellow justices and give them a perspective that otherwise, because of their life experiences, they would not understand. And I think that's extremely important. And I think that's why diversity is important. And we do have some level of diversity within the judiciary, but in my view, not enough. Because I was at a luncheon a couple years ago, and I asked a Supreme Court justice whether the justices think about enough what impact they're going to have on the country and on society. And this particular justice, I won't say the gender, said not enough. And that was disheartening, because I think as we make decisions as judges, we should be thinking about, well, what impact is this going to have on the greater society based upon the rulings that I make? And that's why I think life experience is very important, and you only have the life experience of the country as a whole if you have diversity, which is why I think diversity is essential when it comes to any position or any entity in America. And we're attacking that, and I think that's long-term going to be a problem.
Let's thank Judge Reggie Walton for his time. Thank you all for being here to see Becoming Thurgood, America's Social Architect, WHUT. Dr. Marcus Ford, thank you for your time. Dr. Marcus Ford, I'm an associate professor of political science here at Howard. We're watching the Becoming Thurgood documentary about America's Social Architect. I thought the film was great. I thought they did a really good job of capturing a holistic life.
I really enjoyed this documentary because it's a refreshing reminder of the courage and conviction of Thurgood Marshall and many like him.
I thought it was outstanding. I think it's good for young people to have an opportunity, not just young people, for all of us to have the opportunity to see the contribution that someone like Justice Marshall made to America to try and help us become a better country.
Really important for WHUT to host events like this because we need to know that these people can be us. I think sometimes it feels out of reach. I think when the community gets involved, we learn that there's a process and a pathway that we can take that's available to us, makes our future better.
I think events like this, where we're seeing a documentary about an African-American individual who served not only his community, but the nation at large and helped us to really become a better nation. I think that's important for younger people to see people who look like them play such a huge role in the broader conversation of what it means to be an American. I just think that more events like this are necessary because it makes it feel like we're part of the conversation and not just sitting on the sidelines.
I think it's critical because I think there needs to be a constant drumbeat in our community to let our community know about historical figures have done to try and provide opportunities for those who are in America today.